I have been involved in natural health and healing for about 35 years in a number of different capacities, as a body worker, healer, as a counselor. I do deep emotional healing work. And my interest in research in the last 35 years has really been on optimum health and the elevation of consciousness and transformation of human beings. So that's really been the gist of my research and interest in the last 35 years, looking at both the spiritual aspects of what it is to be a human being and studying the history of a lot of the different spiritual cultures and spiritual thoughts about our relationship to life and our spiritual understanding of life, and also the biological and scientific, anywhere from astrophysics and astronomy and biology and biochemistry and neurology. And a particular interest of mine over those years has been the brain, because in my research it's really been looking into what makes all this work together, and what integrates all this seems to be the human brain. And so from my own perspective and then my own experiences, I've had a lot of actually physical trauma, a lot of physical injury. So studying trauma and what is actually out there to understand what happens in the experience of trauma, from both emotional, physiological, and psychological aspects of that, to the healing possibilities of trauma. And so experiencing a lot of trauma myself, this was, of course, of peak interest to me.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. I can see why, you know, Dr. McFedridge, I take it, or know of him, your research. So I'm wondering if you could tell us, Maika, what had happened. So you kind of talked about this trauma. So what had happened and what problems were you having before you met Karen?
Well, I actually had a number of different things happen. About 29 years ago, I broke my back. I crushed L1, which is the lumbar vertebrae, and did a lot of nerve damage. So it never really healed properly, and I've had a lot of different types of healing work done on it. Mm-hmm. And but ended up in a lot of nerve pain, a lot of scar tissue, which created nerve pain, digestive problems, all kinds of things. And but also I've had in my life probably about 7 or 8 really serious brain concussions. And about 11, 12 years ago, I had a fall where I fell just in front of my temporal bone, and that was probably about the 8th serious concussion I've had in my life. And after that injury, I lost a lot of function. I lost a lot of motor function. I could, you know, fatigue within just a few minutes of any type of physical movement. A lot of cognitive problems, memory. I lost a lot of memory, my ability to access short-term and long-term memory. A lot of difficulties focusing, concentrating. I noticed all of a sudden, a lot of sensitivity with my hearing. I lost taste. My eyesight started to have problems with my eyesight. But especially noticing was sound became excruciatingly painful.
So very sensitive to the sound.
Yeah, very, very sensitive, where it would give me a headache and make me extremely irritable. Mm-hmm. Definitely also noticed a lot of emotional mood swings, you know, went into different aspects of depression. And I mean, it really caused a real change in my life and in my lifestyle.
And this was when was this last injury? Was how many years ago?
This was about, I guess, 12 years now.
12 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. And
had you gotten any help for this, or tried any sorts of had therapy along the way, or after this injury 12 years ago, which sounds like it's pretty significant? What had you done?
I really didn't reach out for any kind of medical help. I've studied a lot of the research on conventional medical models of brain injury, mm-hmm. and especially because of what happened in the National Football League in the Americas, where a lot of the brain research was starting to understand the symptomology of multiple brain traumas.
Right.
And looking at all that research and studying what really they have to offer, it's basically nothing. They don't really have anything that seems to help brain injuries. And in fact, they have a hard time diagnosing it, with only diagnostics coming after you're dead, post-mortem, which wasn't really an option for me.
Yeah. Yes, I would, as a medical physician trained in the conventional model, I would totally agree with you. That there really isn't much. And I used to do disability exams for Social Security, and I think it was missed all the time. All the time. So totally agree.
Yeah.
Were you in the, after this injury, were you in the hospital initially, or?
No, I don't really. I really haven't seen a doctor since I broke my back, which was 30 years ago, up to that point. Okay. Because again, in studying, I've studied extensively the history of the medical model going back hundreds of years, and know very well what the medical model is based on. And it's really based on what used to be called heroic medicine or drug medicine. And it really has nothing to do with actually making the body better.
And healing and health, yes.
Yeah, they treat symptomology with stuff that they're still experimenting with, which mostly is highly toxic side effects. So I'm not really interested in the medical model. I've done a lot of alternative work. Because of the brain injury, I was unable to work. So I didn't really have the funds to do very much. I did what I could for myself. I do take a lot of supplementation especially for regenerating nerve tissue. And I did have some cranial sacral work, which is a type of body work that actually helps to correct trauma in the body also. And it's really, go ahead.
So what I was going to ask is, so when you had that last significant traumatic brain injury 12 years ago, it sounds like your ability to function really dramatically dropped off with all the things you described. Am I understanding that correctly?
Dramatically is an understatement. Yeah, I mean, really, it really, my experience was that my life as I knew it was over. And I had to somehow be able to create a new life where I could function with my limited capabilities. Really, I mean, that's really what it came to.
Yeah, Maika, can you describe for us a little bit of what was that like? I mean, what was your life after that significant injury when you had such a decrease in function? I mean, were you basically in the house? Were you able to get out?
Well, what happened a short time after that is I actually moved to where I live in the Big Island now in Hawaii. I was living on Maui, and I was doing phone counseling at that time to generate income. And after the injury, I really couldn't do that anymore. And a friend of mine was living here in Big Island. I came to visit him, and I had enough savings to live for a couple of months without having to work. And then luckily, life here on the Big Island is a little different than what most people are used to. And there's a lot of people who come from the mainland USA and have residences here where they need people to care for them. So I was lucky enough to get a caretaking job to where I could work 2 or 3 hours at my own leisure to just upkeep the property.
Okay.
And that's really been what I've been doing for mostly the last 12 years, was very limited abilities to what I was doing, and did notice slowly but surely the brain was getting better, but it was a very slow process.
Okay.
Yeah, so that really, I live in Hawaii where the ocean is here. For the first 9 years, I really couldn't swim maybe 10 or 15 yards, 5 meters maybe, without complete fatigue. So I wasn't really able to enjoy where I was living and what I would like to do, because I'm usually pretty physically active and have been most of my life.
Prior to the injury, yes.
Yeah, prior to the injury. When I was listening to some of the work that Grant has put out there. He had a video on YouTube and several of his books, which I purchased, and started to really study his idea from the work that he had done in following trauma all the way back in utero, all the way back to conception, and then into the DNA structures that reside in the cell where memory is stored, where the trauma is actually stored.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fascinated by his work because I had, again, researched diligently for many, many years with a lot of the very advanced work that was being done with trauma. So when I had listened to his work, it really made sense to me in a level that I was very, very familiar with. So I eventually called Grant and talked to him briefly and mentioned him that I would like to get some work done with him. And he mentioned Karen, who had studied with him, and he introduced me to Karen. So I finally contacted Karen, and I could feel from our first conversation that she was sensitive enough and had the background where she could really help me. And my work starting with Karen, little did she know how complex the work would be. And I so appreciate what she was willing to do to assist me in the process.
It sounds like it was a good experience working with Karen. How long did it take to get through the entire protocol and the process?
Well, again, that was an experience I don't think Karen and I were aware of how long it actually would take. But I would say because of my history, my injury history especially, again, to understand the process of something called unwinding or healing, there are all these different layers of injury because each one has a time and each one compounds the next one. So this one leads into this one, into this one. And it was the same way going into the ancestral healing work. We went and I would meet an ancestor and we would do healing with that one. And then the next session, there was another ancestor or two or three to heal. So overall, the process took several months.
And several months.
Yeah, well, once a week or, over several months.
Right, right.
Yeah. Can I just make a comment on that? Yeah,
absolutely.
That Maika had a lot of injury, a lot of damage. I mean, I think you'd agree with that, that's been sort of compounded, I think, by how many injuries you've had and your back injury. And that obviously I've worked with other clients with the process where it's taken, like sort of 3 weeks sort of in comparison. And I'd like to just, I really thank you really, Maika, for hanging in there with me because it was, a long process and, and what you said, you describe it beautifully. It was like unlayering all the layers. But for me, it was like, wow, if this process works with somebody like you who has had so many brain injuries, and that I know that the injury, some of it was really quite damaged, that I'm just really blown away actually by the way you're talking in this interview and the way you are, and because obviously this is the first time you've met Maika, and I can just see such a difference. Anyway, carry on. You just blowing me away. You're blowing me away.
I want to get back to that a little bit later, but the thing I want to say is you're saying it's taken several months to do this. However, again, as a conventional doctor, and as Maika, you pointed out, we don't have anything. So it was 12 years that really nothing happened.
Yeah.
So a couple months.
It's phenomenal. Honestly, it's blowing me away. Yeah.
Compared to some other people that maybe it takes a couple of weeks. All right, that's a long time.
Yeah.
But really, in the whole realm of healing traumatic brain injury, and even if we are doing
Short,
it,
yeah.
we're talking years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
So a couple of months.
It is short,
is
yeah.
really not that
Yeah.
long.
Absolutely.
It's really fabulous to listen to the two of you, and it's almost like Maika, you were in jail, and the door was locked, and then through the process, the door actually was open, and you're like, whoa, I don't know, I'm used to being in jail. Do I actually want to go out and actually walk outside the jail? So that's really amazing. And then your process of using your daughter and getting back into that childlike curiosity. And I'll often tell my coaching clients when they're working on things, I want you to, feel into that and have that childlike curiosity and just open and experience it. I do want to go back just a little bit to when we were talking about what's different and kind of go through a couple different areas. So from a physical standpoint, you said at the beginning you were having a lot of fatigue and were having different physical problems. Has that shifted at all for you, Maika?
It has, yeah. And one of the, especially, I didn't mention it, but there was always a mild headache.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, you get so used to it that this is just the way my life is. And so to all of a sudden not have it there and to realize, wow, I don't have a headache every day anymore. Or I can do more. I can ride a bicycle. I can do these things. Because again, it is, there is a memory that I couldn't do all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of not going out more is the memory that says, oh, you can't do those things.
Right.
So yes, it's like being in jail and all of a sudden you step out and say, oh, can I really do that?
Yeah.
So again, symptomology is, one of them is talking. One of them is the emotional content, which we don't talk a lot about in our society. The idea that emotionally I was very stunted.
Okay. That was my next thing, emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but differentiating that between physical symptomology and emotional symptomology, where in reality they're kind of part of the same dance, I mean, from the physical, like I said, if let's say I have a headache today, emotionally I'm going to be grumpy. I'm going to be, it's not so much fun to have a headache, so I'm not going to be as much fun. I'm not going to be as much interactive because my head hurts, or my neck hurts. Or I can't remember something. And so a lot of those kinds of things.
Is the fatigue better?
The fatigue is actually a lot better. Again, I've had a lot of different type of work with the fatigue. Some things have helped a little bit. The fatigue is, I would say, so much better. I'm able to get up earlier in the morning, and I was having a lot of sleep problems, which, for the past 11 years again. So if I'm getting 4 hours of sleep of night, I'm waking up, I got a headache, I'm groggy.
Right.
Not going to be very, very much fun. And so the idea that I started to sleep a little better, I still have some on and off days, but I noticed there's a big difference in how I experience that and how my body has more energy. And so I can feel that, like Karen said, at some point at the end stage, she could see with her X-ray vision, because she does have X-ray vision. She could see with her third eye, however you want to make that out to be, right? That she can see energetically that, hey, things are clear. You actually have the ability to function properly. And I actually do have to remind myself of that sometimes. Say, hey, I'm not stuck back there.
Yeah.
I can go out and do this. And so, but it's learning how to do it. And luckily, I do have my daughter where she is. She's not familiar with an area. She'll kind of hold back. She'll assess everything and take a little while to go out and play. Yeah. And I look at my process is so similar to hers. My brain is just learning how to do things again.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So you've really gone over the physical changes, the emotional changes, the cognitive changes. And I never met you before, but certainly showing up, you just have this immense fountain of knowledge, and I'm like, okay, we got to stay in touch. We're going to have more conversations.
Yeah,
which
I
is
just
fabulous. And then seeing Karen's reaction is like, whoa, where did this guy come from? What a wonderful message of hope. And one of the things I always say is healing's always possible.
It's always possible,
Always
no matter
possible.
what.
No matter
Yep.
what. Yeah. Would you recommend someone who had traumatic brain injury doing this process, this protocol?
Would I recommend them to Karen in this protocol? I would absolutely say, if you're willing to really heal, and if you're willing to reach out for help, do it now. Like, do it now. Start now, and experience it for yourself.
Perfect. Perfect.
There's so much hope for not only people with TBI, but for us as humans to find a better way to live. And in that, we have to be able to access our potential. And our potential starts with our biological functioning, right? We have to be able to function biologically, neurologically. We have to have some semblance of health and the energy to do it. And in doing that, then we can help our friends and our neighbors and our family. And, you know, because a lot of people, especially with TBI, share that common experience with other people, whether they, you know, meet them in the doctor's office or whatever. And that's what spreads it, like spreading seeds of hope and possibility. And that's really what I would like to share, is that we need to help that, because in true reality, a lot of us are wounded. We might not have specific brain injuries, although a lot of people have traumatic brain injuries from birth and they don't even know it. You know, but if you're not able to function and feel the joy and happiness of life, there's kind of the possibility that maybe you have something that isn't functioning properly biologically, where, you know, in psychology say, oh, it's all in your mind. Well, yeah, it's in your mind. It's in your brain. And let's correct your brain. Let's fix your brain. And you might actually have a different emotional experience or a psychological experience.
Thank you, Maika. Thank you, Karen, for being here. Wonderful testimonial to what's possible. So there is hope. Healing is always possible. Thank you to both of you.